Welcome to TGE live from South Africa. In this action dialogue, we will be engaging with a panel from South Africa on how South Africa is accelerating the pace towards gender equality. My name is Achieng Ojuang, and I am the Executive Director for the Global Compact Network in South Africa. And I'll give just a very brief overview and then just briefly introduce the panel. But really today is about gender equality and the role that business can play to help us to advance gender equality, not only in South Africa, but globally as well. Over the past year, the UN Global Compact Networks have engaged over 300 companies from 19 participating countries to contribute to the achievements of Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically on Goal 5.5, which calls for women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership by 2030. Really, the aim of TGE is for companies, to support companies to set and refine ambitious targets for women representation and leadership in business. And I think most importantly, to take meaningful action to tackle persistent barriers to progress. And so this discussion is going to be about our experiences and practices as companies in South Africa. So we have with us today a really good panel, a panel of 3. And the first person, and I'll just do a very brief introduction because they'll give us a bit more detail about themselves. But our first panelist is Professor Anita Bosch, Professor and Chair of Women at Work at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. And then we have Marcel Koth from Anglo American. He'll tell us more about his role at Anglo American. And we have Dr. Cynthia Kumalo from ESCOM also. So welcome our panelists. I'll start over with you, Professor Bosch. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and the role that you have played on TGE in South Africa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ojuang. It's indeed an honor to be part of this panel and to be part of the UN Global Compact and the work that you are doing in South Africa. I hold the research chair devoted to the study of women at work. And at the business school, our vision is to be a source of value for a better society. And I think this links in very nicely with the Global Compact's aim to mobilize a movement of sustainable companies and stakeholders to create the world we want. And with target gender equality, that is exactly what we're aiming at, linking sustainability then to gender issues, and more specifically within organizations, making sure that organizations can remain sustainable for the foreseeable future without excluding or thinking that women can be excluded and therefore hamper sustainability. And so I'm very excited always to be involved with the Global Compact's work because it dovetails very nicely with the work that we do at the business school, but also more specifically ensures that the practical side of science comes to fruition as well.
Thank you very much, Anita, for that brief introduction. Marcel, over to you, Marcel.
Thank you. Thanks for having us as one of the first signatories of the WEPs. I'm glad we are here today to share some of our experiences. My name is Marcel Koth, and I work as a Living with Dignity Program Manager in Anglo American. And Living with Dignity is the umbrella term we use for our work around women empowerment within the company, but also in our communities, in our host communities. So working in mining, we have quite intricate relationships, intimate relationships, if you like, with the communities in which we operate. So we've always taken it upon ourselves to look at women empowerment, not only within the company, but also in the broader ecosystem in which we operate. So today I'm looking forward to just, sharing a couple of notes and learning some more from others as well as sharing our experience specifically around our participation in the TGE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel. We'll come back to you briefly. Over to Cynthia. Tell us a little bit more and why Eskom decided to be part of the TGE program in South Africa.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Joan, for inviting us, Eskom actually to participate in the engagement session. Yes, I am the what we call your Eskom Women Advancement Program Manager. But I think it's for me it's very critical, to say that diversity and inclusion. I think in terms of the HR trends, we know for 2022, it's one of the 5 priorities. And I think as Eskom, we sort of tried to also include in our HR, our people's plan, a strategic thrust, around a diversity dividend, because we want to ensure that we have a workplace that is fair, that is well represented, at all times. And I think we also view gender equality as a human right matter and as a requisite for sustainable development. Hence, Eskom is very much committed and passionate about driving issues related to gender equality. Yes, indeed, we acknowledge the fact that a lot of strides have actually been made, I think, in the past years. However, there are still some challenges with regard to women representation, especially at leadership level. They are not as represented as we want to. Remember the commitment that we made, both in the 2030 agenda, as well as that the global gender acceleration plan, to say that we should ensure that by 2026, we've got 50% of women in leadership and senior roles. So there's also the issue of the us not abiding to the employment equity regulation, the one on the equal pay for worker of equal value. So for us as Eskom, I think those are the silent point that we are really worried about, or that we are actually striving to achieve. Hence, we are actually participating in some of the initiatives undertaken by Global Compact, as well as the United Nations women as a whole. I think I would pause, and I think the reason why I'm basically here also, I think, as I said, we are actually, as a company, very much committed to gender equality, and I think I will also share what we are doing in Eskom, and I'm also here, to learn from my 2 colleagues with regards to gender equality. I think I've been fortunate, and I think myself also, we've attended some of the sessions that were facilitated by Dr. Bosch. So we are here just to learn and to showcase what our organizations are actually doing with regard to gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I'll now go to Anita. And Anita, I'd like you to set a bit of context. We have a global audience, and people are interested in understanding what is the state of gender equality in corporate South Africa. So please just take us through that.
Thank you. That's it's always when I think about this type of question, your mind goes to how long is a piece of string? And the reason why I say so is corporate South Africa is really a reflection of the elite of the country, and not a reflection of the total population in South Africa. And that is something that we, and I mean that economic elite in the country. So I first want to start with the broader information in terms of population size. South Africa is ranked the 6th largest country in Africa. We're around about 60 million people, just short of that. And we trail Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, Nigeria. So Nigeria is the largest, the most populous country. Our unemployment rate is very similar, for instance, to Nigeria's. It's 34.9%, and that's not the expanded definition. And that would be people that have stopped looking for jobs because they just feel that they will not get it. So that's around about 7.8, nearly 8 million people in the country that are unemployed. Then within that, women, 37.3% of women are unemployed and 32.9% of men. So women certainly are, have lower employment rates. It's really about the types of work then that we have. And I'm starting to move towards corporate South Africa. This we also see displayed in our statistics in corporate South Africa. South Africa is a fascinating country in terms of our legislation. And because we have such fantastic, especially intersectional legislation, I really do think that the corporate world has a lot to show the global audience in terms of thinking not only about gender, but the intersections within gender, those multiple layers that give compounding effects to particular outcomes. And so our legislation is really at the forefront globally. For instance, we're ranked 18th on the global Gender Gap Index 2021, but the lived experience of South African women is a far cry from that. That's 18th worldwide. And interesting enough, to other African countries, Namibia and Rwanda is ranked higher than South Africa. And those are sort of the 3 top ranked African countries. What is clear about corporate South Africa is that we still stuck with a number of imprinted patterns, structural type inequalities that remain within our system. The racial inequalities remain very clear, but then also very, very particularly women and Black women at that. And we have various categorizations of looking at Black women. One of the things with women as a grouping is that in corporate South Africa, a lot more women have part-time employment as in the rest of the globe. And also in the larger economy, there are more women in the informal sector working than men. We certainly have, as we've heard also even at Eskom, the gender pay gap, that remains a big issue. But because we don't collect national statistics on that, I must, yes, there are statistics, but it's not made public. The gender pay gap remains quite elusive, but there are econometric studies that have been done that have pointed out, especially at our very senior levels, that is the top levels of organizations, there's definitely a gap and a widening gap. Interestingly enough, it sort of started closing just after the dawn of democracy in South Africa and now has started widening again. And there's no particular reason, there's no difference between educational background, experience, and so forth of those women, those very, very top women in corporate South Africa. So there's a widening of a gap. What we do know that the middle is it's around about 32% on average. And then towards the bottom of the gap, what's been very good is, again, our legislation that has helped to start closing that gap. And because we have minimum wage, not a living wage, but minimum wage, the gap at the bottom of the pay scales has been closed to a large extent, except for domestic workers. But coming back then to corporate South Africa, you know, corporate South Africa can certainly do a lot more in terms of its role of thinking about how to support employees, women employees specifically, with their load, alleviating their load for unpaid work. Small little things like, for instance, having the option to have food that you can take back home instead of going back home and cooking, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that corporate South Africa can actually do, because our gender roles are very traditional still in our context, and that's not likely to change very soon. We have the issues about women in leadership roles, not sufficient representation, and in fact, women on boards, we have around about, it hovers between 25 and 26% of women representation in listed companies' boards. So that also still remains an area where we certainly can see a lot of a movement. And then also the issue of women as majority owners of businesses that we're not seeing. There's a number of investment houses that have grown over the years where they certainly are women. They've been developed for women by women, and there's a number of notable ones in our economy, but certainly that's an area where there's still quite a large gap. I'm going to stop at that point and come in a bit later again.
Thank you. But before we move over to Marcel, Anita, you bring in the data, and the data in all aspects, you know, of equality, of gender equality, shows these significant gaps. When I come back to you, I'd like to understand how this program is supporting the advancement towards gender equality. But let me go to Marcel first. Marcel, you've participated in the program, and as South Africa, we did offer this program for the first time, even though other countries were going through the second round. At Anglo American, you also have initiatives internally on gender equality. But since you've taken part in this program, what is different? What has changed at Anglo American?
Thank you, Dr. Ojwang. I'd like to just go back a little bit before I come back to 2021, 2022, just to say within Anglo American for quite a number of years now, and certainly since 2017 in earnest, we've been very strongly focused and committed to achieving greater female representation right across the board. So all the way from the operations to the boardroom, if you like. And we've made consistent improvements over the years. As I'm here today, all our South African executives are women. We're a globally operating company with headquarters in London and South Africa. In South Africa, all our executives, as of earlier this year, are women. And I think that in itself is, quite an achievement, especially if we think about the industry that I'm speaking from, which is mining. So that didn't just happen, of course, by accident, but it happened. If I just, and I did have them open here, if I look at the principles also, of course, it happened, because there was great intention behind, empowerment over time and succession planning and related, training, course offerings, but also things that Anita has already mentioned. You said corporate South Africa can do a lot. What about, family-friendly work environments? What about something that we focused on a lot in 2021, psychological safety? So a work environment where everyone can feel safe to speak up, in mining, that means, for instance, in the operations, people can feel safe to actually halt operations if they observe something that they feel isn't safe behavior by a colleague or by themselves. But for us to be able to do that, we needed to create an environment where people feel safe enough to do that. In the more corporate space, of course, it also means that, you know, people, no matter who they are, should feel safe to speak up, voice their opinion. I want to just say a little bit also about one of the focus areas that I specifically work on, which is gender-based violence, because our belief is that gender equality can only be achieved when women and girls are safe and free from violence. So that's something that we've zoomed in on, also given the context within which we operate. And here I'm specifically referring to South Africa, though we are establishing similar initiatives in other operations globally. Most notably at the moment in Brazil, where we are just finalizing baseline studies, and Chile and Peru. But we've looked, and this speaks a little bit, I think, to your question, Anita, around corporate, you know, South Africa can do a lot. And I don't want to come to the last point that we'll be speaking about in terms of action points, but just to say, creating a safe workplace is only one aspect of what corporates can and should do. Of course, that's crucial. And I want to say something about our internal initiatives. But we've also appreciated that, you know, employees live in homes that need to be safe. They live in communities and live their lives in communities as community members. They go to schools that need to be safe. So we speak about a safe workplace, safe communities, safe schools, and safe homes. In safe schools, we work through our South African schools program with 109 secondary schools, and we've just in 2021 started working with early childhood development centers. We cannot be oblivious to the environment within which these schools are situated, and we've taken it upon ourselves to make these schools first and foremost physically safe for girl children attending schools, but also ultimately, psychologically safe. Similarly, the communities within which we operate, we've got already an established and growing community health and well-being initiative in all our communities. At the moment, working in partnership with 141 clinics. In terms of safe homes, we've launched what is often referred to as an industry-leading domestic violence policy and related structures early last year, exactly a year ago, actually, in March last year, where we appreciate, obviously the link between the home and the place of work. And we've put quite a regime in place in terms of responding, but also in terms of identifying risk and assessing risk. And we've got now a global network of risk assessors who are also in a position to then refer adequately. And one of the big ones in terms of workplace safety is that we've worked very hard over the last 18 months to revise our South African policy landscape around bullying, victimization, and harassment, including sexual harassment. And we are just about to launch our revised South African policy in this regard. And we've also revisited our procedures. And this is leading to the creation of a victim-centric hub, not quite a one-stop center, but the idea is really quite similar. And this hub, which is staffed generously, including with psychosocial support and case managers who will be the direct counterpart to complainants. And we want to make sure that no matter where you are and who you are across our South African businesses, you have access to a fair and transparent process of investigation. Should I leave it there for the time being?
You can, Marcel. We'll come back to it. And you
didn't give
really
us a time limit. I could go on and on, but I think leave it there for now.
You really do bring up important, an important entry point to doing this work, that we have to be able to ensure women's safety at the workplace, in the community, safety at schools, and overall, because that is really, really important. It actually is important that women's safety is prioritized for the other equalities to even, be meaningful. So thank you for bringing that up, and we'll come back to aspects of it a little later. Cynthia, if I may come to you, through the work that is going on at Eskom, and to just ask, yes, what is inspiring the kind of actions you're taking? What's going on at Eskom? And I know that a lot is going on at Eskom at any one given time, but important to bring this one up today.
Yeah, I think I want to take you back to 2015. I think when we sort of launched what you call your Eskom Women Advancement Program. I think by then, when come August, people will have, there will be events. Normally, women will be wearing nice hats and so forth. And I can't say there was no impetus, on gender equality, but it was like, it's a Women's Day, it's a Women's Month. People must go and, have fun and so forth. And I think we sort of, came up with this program called your Eskom Women Advancement Program, which has, I think, 5 focus areas. One on women in leadership. I think it basically seeks to, address some of the issues that Professor Bosch has also, highlighted in terms of, the lack of representation of women in senior leadership roles. There's one in women in nuclear. As you know, we do have the Quebec facility, and we sort of wanted to sort of look at, the needs as well as the kind of, interventions we can put in place, to advance women in that particular sector. We also have a focus area called women in the technical environment. Also, I mean, Eskom, it's a male-dominated environment with only, I think it's 37% of our personnel is actually women, so it's still highly male-dominated. And we do have a focus area on creating a conducive work environment. And I think this one is very, very broad, very, very holistic. I think it addresses issues of looking, reviewing some of the policies, in place to ensure that they are gender sensitive. I think we were quite privileged to have the Commission for Gender Equality to come in on board and facilitated some of the sessions in trying to say, let us look at the policies that are there in Eskom, and let us try to make them, more gender friendly and so forth. So we were quite successful in doing that. We also developed a sexual harassment policy and sort of tried to review it, so that we make sure that it becomes more sensitive, to issues, of women. We also have a focus area. But also around the creating a conducive environment. I think there's most of our activities, actually are centered around that. I think the issue of my sister's keeper, it's more of, making sure that, we create also a safe environment, making sure that, we protect, our females when going out, on calls and so forth. We ensure that, they're safe, they're safe and so forth. The issue of protective clothing also. I think you'd agree with me that I think as Africans, I think our female Africans, our build is quite different, from our, other ethnic groups. And, if you come in with these tight trousers, obviously with the, the way we are built in terms of the, the calves and so forth, we find that, it doesn't fit and so forth. So we had to basically look at issues of, the uniforms, that women were actually wearing, in Eskom. And I think we succeeded, to that. in terms of mentorship, I think initially we also had we started very well with regard to mentorship. I think we trained the way almost 200 women whom we basically trained, as mentors. We are in the process of sort of resuscitating that and to ensure that, we do have, women, but also because we are striving to create a just and inclusive society. So we are also bringing in our male counterparts, to ensure that we are also not sort of being seen as being discriminating, against them. So we are reviving our mentorship program wherein, for example, we'll have both females and both males, mentoring, the mentees, in preparation so that when positions, do come, people are ready, in that regard. The gender calendar also, I think we do have a gender calendar. Annually, we develop a gender calendar and we commemorate a lot of events. I think in the next 2 weeks, we'll be commemorating the International Women's Day. I think this year we have sort of partnered with the South African Institute of Electrical Engineer. I think we'll be having the Minister of Social Human Settlement, Minister Kubai, who will be sort of delivering the keynote, address. We'll also be having a panel, a discussion. The chairperson of SAIE, Professor, I can't remember the correct name. So we will actually be, commemorating the day. I think at a power station level also, there's definitely going to be some commemorations, where we'll be taking our female leadership there for some panel discussions, around, International Women's Day, the value of it, and as ESCOM, as a way also of intensifying, our quest, for gender equality. Under we also have another focus area on partnerships, a lot has been done. We've got partners. I think we are participating in the Global Compact, initiatives. We've got the Women in Principle, but also the United Nation Women. I think the South African leg. We've been partnering with them. We also have we also launched the He for She campaign because we actually thought that our males are our important allies for us to achieve gender equality. In the past there was the tendency of sort of isolating male, but there was resistance. So we actually felt that if we want to to succeed, we need to take them on board. So we did launch our He for She. Unfortunately, COVID came in the past 2 years, so nothing has happened. But we've just appointed an executive sponsor who will actually be rolling some sort of initiatives, bringing men, on board, to ensure that we strive, for gender equality. As I said, also the women Women Empowerment Principles. Yes, we are also signatory to the Women Empowerment Principle. Currently, ESCOM is also facilitating those sessions. We participated in the need assessment, the survey that was planned, and we got I think very good marks or feedback regarding that. But I think in this financial year, in the next financial year, basically, we'll be striving to achieve some of the recommendations that were made during, or some of the recommendations that sort of came out of the study. I'm going to pause because there's a lot that I can also talk, for the whole day. There's a lot happening around. But I think also, I don't know whether I did mention the fact that we are striving, we are in the process of coming up with a women development program. We do have our leadership, our ESCOM learning faculty. However, we never had a women leadership program. They've been programmed, they were just being generic and so forth and so forth. Unfortunately, things have, they're going now at a faster rate. There is one. We've done some benchmarking. We've done some mapping. I think in the new financial year, it will be probably if one of being afforded an opportunity next time, one would actually share as to how far are we with regards to the women development. In terms of our representation. I think I must be honest with you, there's been some improvement. I think where we are actually struggling is at executive level, Professor Abosh. It's only 20%, you know, unlike 50. It's 20% of our complement is women. But I think at senior management level, we are doing well at 43%. Also at middle management level, we are doing well. So we are actually hoping that, I think what we've seen, I think since the inception of the program, and also by participating in, you know, the initiatives of the global compact of the, you know, the web and the women, the UN women in general, we've seen there's been some change also in terms of perceptions. Also, the impetus has sort of gained momentum, because in the past, as I said, you know, when you talk about issues of women, it was like, it's Women's Day, Women's Month, and so forth. But now, for me, there is a reason I can, you know, confidently so, because I've been struggling, you know, to convince.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia.
Yes.
When we come back to you, I think it's important to really understand if there's traction. You know, as a company, you can sign up to many initiatives, but when it comes down to progress and that data that Anita was talking about, has there been movement? Is there movement? Is there improvement? But I'll come back to you on that in a moment. Anita, just quickly about the program. How do programs like this, like the TGE that you have helped us to facilitate for South African companies, are they accelerating change?
For me, the important thing about the Target Gender Equality Program is most likely one of the key elements to it. It's multifaceted, but one of the key elements is the WEPS tool that's been referred to, the Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis tool. Now that tool is extremely useful. I started off by saying South Africa really has quite a lot of really fantastic forward-thinking intersectional legislation. And so the South African corporates in general, as a baseline, do quite well when they do their first analysis with the WEPS. WEPS gives us an indication, a benchmark as to where we're at. But corporates in South Africa can also sort of think that they are advancing quite fast without necessarily doing deeper work, because our legislation allows it and mandates it, in fact, you know, for us to look at particular things. The question is, what do we do with those stats? And so what the multiple analyses that one does at different times with a WEPS tool helps you to do then is to see whether you truly are making progress and how you can benchmark yourself against other corporates in a particular region and then also globally. I mean, just thinking about the leadership and gender transformation strategy, very often there, we've spoken about it, you know, globally there's sort of a bottleneck there. Other workplace targets that companies have. But very often the marketplace and the community areas are overlooked. And WEPS covers all 4 of these areas. So that's useful. The second thing is the fact that it's structured. And this helps an organization then to say, well, here's a benchmark, but here's a starting point. So even if you've really, if you're in the audience and you've never really actually, you've known that the company needs to start moving in this direction, but you don't know where to start, this is a very good program in that sense that it's very well structured to help cushion you into action so that you don't scurry around. Dr. Khumalo has just mentioned, you know, Eskom's areas. Marcel's mentioned what Anglo Gold's doing. Each company has a different context and phase, and in that way, it really helps you.
Thank you, Anita. And I just said Marcel is from Anglo-American. But back to you, Marcel, you know, activists in South Africa have often said that gender-based violence is a pandemic. that preceded the current pandemic that we have. Gender-based violence is a pandemic in South Africa. So I know that Anglo America is doing great work. It's your entry point to this work on gender equality overall, and correct me if I'm wrong there. But I wanted to ask, because I know that one company cannot do it alone. It's a pandemic in this environment. Are you collaborating with other stakeholders? Are there examples of how you are scaling up this work so that you are impacting beyond the Anglo-American community?
Thank you, Dr. Ojwang. Just to say, because you mentioned this is our entry point to the work on gender equality, just to clarify that, you know, all the internal work around recruitment, around talent development, mentoring, flexible working arrangements, gender pay gap, physical safety, I mentioned psychological safety. You know, the work that we do around gender-based violence doesn't take away from that. So just to quickly clarify. Yes, and I do think one of the tasks, and this speaks to both your question as well as the point that Anita just made around deeper work. I know you mentioned that in a different context, but deeper work around gender-based violence to us goes to understanding the root causes of gender-based violence and working on those. And our program around this, the Living with Dignity framework, was launched just before the global lockdowns linked to COVID-19. But it was always our aim to work on norm-shifting programming. So to really bring about the changes in understanding, in beliefs, and then ultimately in behavior that lead to the kind of harmful behaviors that we see. Now, that's not work that, you know, is done quickly. It's not work that can, you know, quickly show better numbers. If anything, you know, it takes quite a long time, and it's not what, you know, corporates would necessarily be looking for in terms of the kind of results that they can produce. So we are quite aware of that. And now to come to your question, then, it first of all needed some advocacy internally, you know, and it's ongoing actually. We do need our executives and everyone else who's involved in this work to actually acknowledge that and appreciate that this is work, we're in it for the long haul. But it's the only way we can really bring about a sustainable change in belief systems and behaviors. And that's for all of us. So to come to your question in terms of, are we doing it alone? No, you can't. You really have to build partnerships. And the partnerships we are talking about here are manifold and go into different directions. So starting with global executives, for instance, you know, can we get our global executives to put this on the agenda whenever they speak publicly, whenever they engage with people within the sector and beyond the sector. Then within the sector, we have, you know, in South Africa, we work closely with the Minerals Council on their GBV working group that, you know, where we collaborate with other partners across the sector. We also have a tripartite alliance with all our organized labor and us as employer and the ministry, where we've spent the last year to put together very strong commitments that we all commit to. Now, the advantage there is that these unions are not Anglo-American unions, right? So again, we are reaching other partners within the sector, and ultimately union members are members of the community. So we are also moving into the community. Talking about community, we are, we have built partnerships with community-based and other organizations and other NGOs, particularly in response to COVID, strengthening response services where they were already available. But as I've said, our aim has always been to work on root causes. So we are in the process of recalibrating, if you like, to go back to our initial aim, which is addressing root causes and bringing about sustainable shifts in beliefs and consequently in behavior. So we are building, we've just contracted a consortium of organizations in South Africa that is helping us to put a gender transformative curriculum together, which, however, will not just be an off-the-shelf kind of product, but this curriculum will, if you like, travel to our individual sites and communities and will then be co-facilitated in those facilities in a way and language that makes sense to that particular environment. And the last one I just want to mention in response to your question for South Africa is the NBI, the National Business Initiative, which then of course goes beyond mining as a sector again, where we work within the GBB working group with partners across sectors. That's it for South Africa. Just briefly mentioning the global ones, we work quite closely with Business Fights Poverty, and of course, yourselves to drive the same messaging, if you like, globally. I just want to mention two things there in terms of the collaboration as well. The one is to kind of really make an effort to have a deeper understanding, do the deeper work, as you said, Anita. And the second one is, and that's linked to the first one, to really be introspective for each one of us in our role, to really see how do I actually perpetrate inequality, how do I perpetrate violence, whether I want to do that or not, and to really challenge myself, challenge each one of us, challenge ourselves in how we speak to colleagues, how we look at colleagues differently, but even on the home front, right? How do I raise boys and girls? What are the kind of stereotypes that we need to tackle?
Thank you, Marcel. We have about 9 minutes to go. And Cynthia, I know I did ask you about if there's traction, if there's improvement, and that is what we want to, to put our thumbs on. But I want, over and above that question, I also want to ask, is the work on gender equality driven from leadership, or is it coming from the ground up? Because I think that is important. From what I'm hearing from Anglo-American, and Marcel, you can respond to this later, it's both. Is it coming from the top of Eskom's leadership?
Yes, my dear. I think it's both. I think from at an executive level, we do have an executive sponsor, and Sipule, our group executive human resources, she's the executive sponsor. Divisionally, we have just established some divisional structures, and I think thus far at 3 divisions, we do have executive sponsors at divisional level, just to ensure that it has that leadership that it aspires. You will. I've just. I think I mentioned earlier the International Women's Day. Our chief executive was supposed to have our chief financial officer will actually be standing in, on his behalf. During the 16 days of activism, I think our leadership was there addressing, issues of sexual harassment, issues of, violence, against the LGBTQI community as well as women, and children. So I can clearly say, I can confidently say that there is support both at the top as well as on the ground.
Okay, and back to my question, are you seeing improvement before I go back on a round quickly?
Our targets, as I'm saying. Oh, okay. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm saying that there is improvement. We struggled initially, to appoint, women. Currently, what is happening also, I used to be the employment equity assigned manager, myself as well as Elsie, who's the group executive, our HR. We used to, when there are sort of requests for recruitment, they used to come to us and we'll do a sort of an analysis. For example, a particular division, just to say, where are we in terms of our targets, and to sort of make recommendations for the appointment of women. Hence, I said one area that we are not doing very well is at our executive level. That is the group executive level. The group executives, they call them group executives. There we are at 20%. I think that's where we are still, encountering some challenges. But at senior management level, we are moving towards. We are at 42%, as well as at our middle management level, we are at 42%. But I think, as I said, more still needs to be done at the group executive level to ensure that we've got more women, on board. Currently, I think there's three. It's Elsie, it's Untitled, and there's the other one from legal services.
Okay, now that's great to know that there's some improvement and that over time you are able to track. Anita, just your final one before I go back to the two companies. And I know maybe I think you said a bit of it already, but what should companies take out of this program, the biggest?
I think one of the greatest benefits is the fact that one becomes part of a community of sort of like-minded organizations and individuals working in those organizations, trying to figure out what to do, how to move towards their better selves as individuals, but also then in the organizations that they represent. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits, and that you can learn from peers, just as we're having this panel now and thinking about deeper work. So if we get the numbers right, what happens with voice? How do we ensure that we really actually start moving over to the ideal that we're aiming for, to make businesses much more sustainable and better places to work in society? And that takes a different type of leader, not just a woman leader or a man leader. It takes a leader that considers other things. So voice, working with leaders just in general, on inclusion and diversity and harnessing the benefits of that. And then I think the other aspect is the fact that the WEPS tool helps you to consistently, or regularly at least, benchmark, and it gives you other ideas, because embedded in the tool are ideas. And then most likely the last part is that it's evidence-based. It's not just thumbsuck. It's not just a group of people who are doing things because they just like doing it. There's a research behind it, which means that you're moving in the right direction, and that you're not just plodding along. And I'd say that those are most certainly some of the big benefits of being part of the program.
Thank you for that, Anita. Marcel, quickly, in less than a minute, what would your call be to other companies anywhere in the world?
Because you're giving me a minute, the internal ones I won't speak to. There's the obvious ones around the policy, environment, zero tolerance stance, also having the leadership commitment, of course. But also, to look at options, what happens externally? What role do I play as a corporate citizen in my specific environment, in my society? What are the options? And it can be, small steps. It can be creating physical safety in the malls in which I operate. It could be, very strong signaling to other partners. It could be having a workplace-based program that happens during working hours, but that actually speaks to, peaceful conflict resolution. And then the other point I've already mentioned is to really challenge our own biases and stereotypes. So I think those are some of the points that I would want to leave with.
Thank you, Marcel, very much. Cynthia, your call to companies, what would you encourage companies to do?
I would encourage companies to have a clear, either you call your diversity and inclusion strategy or clear strategies, on advancing women. I think it's very
strategy.
Yes,
That is great. Thank you very much. I just need to close over by making some announcements to share that we will be as South Africa, beginning the second round of Target Gender Equality Accelerator Program. And it's open once again for companies out there who would like to participate. It is really beneficial based on what the panelists have said today. And so really this is the launch of our second round of TGE, and the details will follow. But before we wrap up, because we have less than a minute to go, I just really want to say thank you to Anita, to Marcel, to Cynthia for coming through and talking to us today. We really appreciate the experiences, the challenges, and the journey that you are on as a company. And we, from the Global Compact Network side, we wish you all the best. And we are always available to support your journey. So thank you. And that is the end of this panel discussion.